The relationship between a worship leader and a worship drummer is pivotal in a worship setting. The connection for both leaders creates a form of nonverbal communication, which helps to create an atmosphere of unity on the team. That way, the Holy Spirit can do whatever He so chooses to do during worship. I had the opportunity to sit down with the very first worship pastor I served beside, and I got to dig into his approach, his heart, and what it means to truly worship. I'm excited about this, guys. Let's jump into the Leader Insight, Bridging Gaps for Worship Drummers. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to serve beside some incredible worship leaders over the years. And honestly, one of the first ones that I had the opportunity to serve alongside with is Chris Arnold. Thanks, Chris, for coming and hanging out with us and
absolutely
giving us some wisdom. I really appreciate you and what you've sown into me and my family's life. So I thought it'd be really fun to just give the opportunity for you to kind of sow some information and some wisdom into some other people's lives. So let's just start off and let's just be super easy. And can you tell us just a little bit about yourself so we can kind of get to know who Chris Arnold is?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, man. I love what you're doing on this channel and
thanks,
the people that you're impacting for the kingdom. Yeah, Jordan's awesome. I have a wife, 15 years almost.
That's awesome.
5 kids.
Yeah.
And we've done ministry for a while, and we love it. And God's been super good to us. Our kids range from 13 down to 5.
That's awesome.
And 3 girls, 2 boys, and a lot of them are musical. They love the Lord and they love to sing and use their talents for Jesus. So it's pretty awesome.
I love hearing that, man.
Yeah.
So currently, where do you serve at? I know where you serve at.
Right.
Where do you serve?
Absolutely. So right now we're in Salem, Indiana, at a church called Mount Tabor Christian Church, which is where we are today, making this video.
Yeah.
But we've been here for almost 3 years. It'll be
That's
3
awesome.
years this year. So yeah, it's awesome.
That's really, really cool, man. Is there any little pieces of information about who Chris Arnold is that you'd like to share?
Goodness. Other than loving music, I love sports a whole lot.
Okay.
So being from Indiana, I'm a Hoosier fan.
Okay.
So we lived in Ohio a while. That was very much rough with Buckeye country.
I'm sorry, man.
Wolverine country as well, Michigan. Yeah, we love music. We love sports. My family and I, we love to play games. We just started camping, so we're super excited to do some camper camping as a family. And that's nutshell. Love coffee, tons.
Okay.
Tons of coffee.
All right.
Yeah.
That is our love language, really.
Absolutely. Commonality.
Yes, for sure. We'll come together and we'll have 4 or 5 cups.
Pots.
It's very true. Very true. We come down and it's like, all right, let's get ready for coffee. So
Absolutely.
Coffee and good conversations.
Yes.
So, well, hey, you told us about being here at Tabor, and I love the story that brought you to Tabor. Like when I heard it, I was like, whoa, this is such a God thing. And I would love for you to share just the story in general of how you got here.
Absolutely. Okay. So back in 2019, we began interviewing for, back up just a little bit. Tabor was looking for a worship pastor. They've never had a worship pastor at this church. They were looking for one, and somebody reached out to me, mutual connection, back in 2019. We prayed about it, talked about it. It just didn't feel right at that point. We were actually outside of ministry. Spent about 5 years out of ministry. God just rebuilding some things, rebuilding the foundation, which He's so good at doing. So we started kind of feeling that nudge to get back in. Prayed about this place. The door just did not seem right to open. So we said no. And at that point, we were also applying for other churches. And so one of those churches kind of came together, and we began interviewing with them. And so that took us all the way down to Texas. And so we did ministry down there. And so I told Tabor, I was like, hey, it's just not the right timing. They were so gracious. Kingdom-minded people seem to just get it.
Yeah.
And so one of the guys I spoke to, he said, that's great. He said, we're happy for you regardless, as long as you're in God's will. So we went down to Texas, learned a whole lot. Obviously, people know 2020 happened and COVID happened. During the span of time in Texas, the church closed its doors like everywhere. And so we spent a lot of time at home as a family, and having 5 kids, Quality time's huge for us. We love it. We love getting together. And a lot of people got tons of quality time during that span. And so we're down in Texas and we're doing ministry from home and being together as a family. And I loved it. And I didn't realize how much I needed it. And it really filled my tank a ton. We were not serving in worship and production during this time in Texas.
Okay.
We were doing another type of ministry. And I thought I was okay giving up worship ministry, but it's in me. And I love leading and administration and those kind of pieces, but I missed worship ministry. And even when I would listen to a worship song, it would just make me cry because I just missed that and just the presence of God in that way, so tangible. And so we were there. And while we were there, it just began to feel like this may not be right. This may not be where we're supposed to be anymore. Yeah. And so through the course of time, God kind of worked through some of the leaders at the church we were at. I'm dealing with all of this like uncertainty in my heart and mind. My wife and I are talking a lot about it. And I believe God prompted the campus pastor at the campus we were at because he pulled me aside. He's like, "Hey, you doing okay?" And I was like, I could lie, but that's not what I want to do here. And so I didn't. And I said, no, I'm not doing good at all. I said, I don't know if this is right. Yeah. And we were only there for about 8 to 10 months at that point. And Tabor came back to my mind because he said, if you weren't here, what would you do? And I was like, well, I mean, worship ministry is my heart. I mean, that's what I love. Yeah. And so Tabor came back to my mind and I told him about it and he said, why don't you reach out to them? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, I'd rather you leave and go do what God really has for you to do so that somebody who God's preparing to come and take your place can actually do that.
Wow.
If you're holding that person up, then you're holding up, kind of almost holding up the plans of God. Not that we have that much power, but there is power in your yes and your no. And so I reached back out to the gentleman who graciously, I declined to Tabor the first time, reached back out to him. We got a phone conversation together, and he put me in touch with the lead pastor here. We spoke on the phone, and it's COVID, you guys. I'm thinking, there's no way this church is going to look at hiring a guy during COVID. But my wife and I, we determined, no matter what happens, we felt released to leave Texas. So we came back with no job, okay? That's a faith step, a little scary, not exactly what I would encourage you to do. However, if God leads you and he's in it, it all comes together. Moved in with family, quickly began talking to this church. And the lead pastor, he's told me since we've been here that after that first conversation, I was in my closet, by the way, closed up in my closet. I talked with him, and he said he knew after that first conversation that he's like, that's our worship pastor. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but that's our guy.
That's so cool.
And super cool. God was confirming with him and me, and so we came, and they couldn't make any promises to us, but basically, long story short, they said maybe January of 2021, ended up being June of 2020, and they brought us on in an interim position full-time, and I'm the very first worship pastor they've had, so such an honor and a privilege to do that, and this church has grown so much in their worship and understanding as I keep growing in my worship and understanding of how to lead them. So that's kind of it. Long story, I know, but that's amazing how God opened up those doors.
That's so cool. And I really love how you say that you're also learning too, because it really is a continuous thing, no matter your position, you're always learning, whether it is behind the drum kit, behind the guitar, or leading worship. Oh my goodness. There's so much there, and there's so much to unpack too. So yes. So you started going into the part that I was actually going to lead into, which is, can you tell us a little bit more about Tabor? Obviously you felt called here. You felt like you needed to be here. So what drew you to Tabor, besides obviously the position, but what drew you here?
Well, this is Southern Indiana's home for us. So a lot of families around here. But I wanted something. I loved being at the church we were at in Texas, but it was in a big area. Fort Worth is where we were at. Very busy. I missed my roots of hospitality and the one-on-one conversations in the lobby with people, the getting coffees and lunches, and it not feeling rushed. And in bigger cities, that's something you have to fight much harder for.
It's the culture.
It is. And so coming back here, I love the simplicity of this church. We run about 300 on a Sunday.
Awesome.
And the people, the biggest thing is more than the amount of people that's here, is just the quality of character that I see in people here. The families, they're raising their kids very similar to how we are trying to raise our kids. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in a big city. I'm not saying it doesn't, but we loved that. And the church, they felt primed for somebody to come in and make a difference and impact quickly.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty excited about the chance and the opportunity to come in and teach more than anything. So a pastor is somebody who's shepherding, but I'm also a teacher every single Sunday, and I love the opportunity that I get to be able to do that. Yeah. So super cool.
Yeah, I'm also a little biased too, because you taught me essentially how to worship. Like, and we've had discussions about this before, but like, you really taught me how to really dig in and like understand, like, look, you're worshiping the Father, you're worshiping God, and again, I grew up in like the small little Methodist church that had a piano with a choir, and like learning how to transition from that to worshiping in like, drums, keyboard, live music, and still like going back to that root of like, He's the Father, you worship Him, and like all of this can be stripped away. Are you still worshiping? And honestly, you taught me that, and I really appreciate like that wisdom that you bestowed upon us.
Well, God did that in my life after we had our time together in Ohio, because He stripped all of that away, and it felt literally like your whole soul was being peeled open, and I don't know, reset. I don't even know what the right words to use.
Yeah.
But to see what you're made of in those seasons, I thought I was made of more than I was, and God showed me quickly, like, there's some work that needs to be done in here. And it took Him 5 years, but I'm a slow learner.
Aren't we all?
He did it though. We're grateful to be back.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Hey, do you like coffee? Or are you one of those weirdos that actually sleeps? If you are a fan of coffee, I want to put a company on your radar. I want to give a shout out to Working Joe's Coffee for helping me through the last few weeks. Just like my passion for creating content, Working Joe's Coffee is passionate about providing fresh, high quality, roast to order coffee. Yes, you heard me right. Roast to order. Once you place your order, Working Joe's Coffee will roast your coffee, bag it up, and ship it to you. That way when you receive it, it is at its freshest. I have the breakfast blend, and then I also have their cold brew, which both of these are absolutely delicious. If you want to try any of their stuff, their website is down in the description. Make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe button with the bell notification to stay up to date of what is new and the new releases that are coming out. I do see a coffee review video on the horizon. Now back to the leader insight.
I love your approach to worship. So I'd love to hear, on a Sunday morning, how do you choose your songs for Sunday, for worship? I'd love to hear that, if you wouldn't mind unpacking that a little bit.
Absolutely. Obviously the Christian word here would be prayer. Lots of prayer. Yeah. Pray and figure out what God's saying, because it can change. Learning the DNA of your church. What are they singing currently? Some of what are they listening to, but the biggest thing is what are they singing, and then trying to figure out, okay, let's start there. You have to have a starting point before you can really start navigating anywhere. But something that's new that I learned from a worship leader that I really look up to, his name's Andy Rozier.
Okay.
He was at Vertical Worship. He's out at New Life now in Colorado. But he talked about there's three things whenever you're building a worship set.
Okay.
And so I really listened in when he said this, but he said the first songs that you look at choosing are gathering songs.
Okay.
And he used the analogy, he said, when I invite somebody to my house, and he said, and they come in, and I greet them, and then they sit down at my table, and we start eating. He said, midway through dessert, I don't jump up and say, hey, welcome to my house. He said, that happened when I opened the door and said, you're welcome to be here.
Yeah.
He said, it's got to be the same with our worship. He said, when people come in, and he said, when you start a worship service, he said, you have gathering songs. It's like, come on, let's go. Let's go together. Let's worship God. Let's invite Him here now.
Yeah.
You don't put one of those songs middle of the set.
Yeah.
And so, your songs like House of the Lord, things like that, we're doing this now.
Yeah.
And so he comes in, and then he said the next group of songs you look at are testimony songs.
Okay.
He said, and I think the percentage was about 70% of the songs that we'll sing will be testimony songs.
Okay.
And he said you really don't need to change that, because he said this is where I was, this is what God did, this is who I am today because of it, and those are all those types of songs. And so you think about a lot of your worship songs, many of them fall right into that category.
Yeah.
That's easy to choose.
Yeah.
I think some of the toughest ones will be this last category, and those are ascriptive songs. And that is where we transition from this is where I was, this is what God did, to now all glory to Him.
Yeah.
Now all praise to Him. Not me, nothing I've done here. It's all about Jesus now at this point. So you got your songs about what God did. Now you have your songs directly to Him.
Yeah.
And so I have used that whole method, and I've watched our worship change so much here. But the ascriptive songs are some of the hardest to find, because a lot of your worship leaders and your songwriters, a lot of them will write those testimony songs. People can relate to that a ton. And there's nothing wrong with that, but those ascriptive songs are powerful, man. And you'll watch the atmosphere change when you do it that way.
Now, when you say ascriptive songs, forgive me because I'm not sure. Like, as an example, like, can you give me an example of one just so I know, like, what direction you're talking about?
Absolutely. So that ascribing worth piece, your Agnus Dei for an older song.
Okay.
Newer one, Great Are You, Lord.
Yeah.
It's your breath in our lungs. That's one piece that still has us involved. But then all the earth will shout your praise.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's just that whole, it all changes when you do that. And so, going back to even like an older song, like a Rich Mullins song, like Awesome God.
Yeah.
Those are pieces that would have that in there. You're Never Gonna Let Me Down. Like all of those are just great ways that take my response out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just now what He's done.
Awesome. That really helps me.
Awesome.
I don't have the microphone and I don't sing. I'm always behind the drum kit. But knowing the direction that you should go really helps me to understand my role as a drummer to help push forward your ministry, to push forward the worship.
Yes.
Which this kind of also brings us to the next point and my next question. I want to know how to best serve the worship pastor that I'm serving under.
Yeah.
So what are some tools or what are some pieces of wisdom that you would give, a worship drummer that is looking to serve on your team? What do you look for in a worship drummer, I should say?
Yeah. The heart is the biggest thing first, right? I would take a guy who's a little bit rough around the edges as far as skill, if his heart is spot on. If his heart's going after God, and that would go not just for a drummer, that would go for any position, right? Yeah. Talent's one thing. Talent only gets you so far.
Amen. Your
heart is really what I'm after. But when specifically talking about a drummer, there is a bit of skill level that is needed. Being able to play on time, being able to start and stop a song, understand certain components. I don't even think you have to talk drum lingo necessarily to be good at it, but understanding the ins and outs of worship, those subtle nuances, understanding when to swell, when not to swell, understanding your instrument enough to know how it can fit within the grand scheme of dynamic, and that is huge. If you're a young drummer, learning that just because you learned a new tom roll and you can go across 4 toms at once, you don't have to pull out all the stops.
Yeah.
Keeping it simple is huge, but being intentional. When that swell is there, there's intention work. When you learn how to follow body language.
Yeah.
That can be tough, because there is that, especially if you don't have chemistry with the worship pastor yet. I would encourage you to sit down, talk to the guy or the girl that you're serving under, find out, what do you need from me? Just like you're asking, ask them, what do you need from me as a drummer? What can I do to better help the atmosphere? But again, if your heart's there, that's like 90% of it for me.
Okay.
And then the 10%, we can work out the kinks on that. Can you play with click? Okay, we'll work on that. Can those are all pieces that we can grow in.
Yeah. For me, what it sounds like is you're looking for the heart and then areas that they're willing to grow in.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool.
Very rarely will you get the perfect person who's done all. I've played in studios, and you're just not going to get that necessarily. But you get a guy or a girl who loves Jesus a whole lot. we can start there.
Yeah, for sure. I have one last question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
If you were able to give any piece of wisdom to young worship leaders, drummers, anybody that's in your team, if you can give them one piece of wisdom that they could focus on to help them be better at not their position, but like where they're serving, what would that piece of information be?
I think the biggest thing is, are you cultivating your own relationship with Jesus well? What's your God time like? What's your quiet time like? Yeah. Are you still as impressed by his presence at year 10 as you were when you first got out of school or when you first started? Because his presence matters. Yeah. And I think another thing that I've learned over the years, especially for worship leaders, go back and listen to yourself. Have private worship time. Can you lead yourself in worship? I know that's a weird thing. Like, can you actually lead yourself in worship?
Yeah.
Because if you can't lead yourself in worship, it's going to be real hard for you to lead other people in worship.
Yeah.
And I would encourage drummers, keyboardists, bass players, acoustic guitar players, electric guitar players, even percussion, anything that you have as part, stringed instruments, the whole bit. Be in love with the presence of God and him being in the room. Be mindful of when he's there, and also learn to discern when something's amiss. And then go back to that prayer again, that prayer closet. God, what do you want? Where are we missing? Be interruptible. Don't get so focused on, we got to 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then back to 1. No, just go, have a plan. The Holy Spirit does work in organization, but be willing to say, we're going to take a left turn when it was supposed to be a right turn.
Yeah.
Be ready for that. But his presence is powerful, and your relationship with Jesus matters above all else.
Amen.
Just make sure you're cultivating that.